So thanks so much, everyone, for joining. What we'll ask you to do is turn off your microphones and your videos, just so it doesn't mess with the look and feel of it. But please do type in your questions as we go along. So I have a list of questions I was thinking of asking Adrian, but obviously your questions will be much more relevant than mine. So I'm just going to try to get my list up here. So this is Adrian, who I think we've had a good few times into the college and on Instagram Live and all the rest of it. So we really appreciate it. Do you know, I saw this job last week and I thought I hadn't seen a graduate HR role advertised in a while.
Yeah.
I said, you know what, I'm going to email him and see will he come on, so you guys have a better chance when you send in your applications. So we really appreciate it, Adrian. So can I start by asking you about For Purpose and what is it?
Sure. So first of all, just thanks a million for inviting me to do the session today, Caroline. I'm delighted to talk to yourself and the students about ourselves and about the role that we have. So I suppose just in terms of For Purpose and who we are and what we are, so For Purpose is a graduate programme for the not-for-profit sector in Ireland. So we basically place graduates all across different types of NGOs. So say, for example, we have people in Sightsavers, we have graduates in Focus Ireland, Social Entrepreneurs Ireland. So it's really kind of quite a widespread of graduates that we have across the sector. And in terms of our role, in terms of where we kind of fit into that, so if an organisation is working with us, then we manage the full recruitment process for their graduate. So that's everything from the advertising campaign to the screening interviews, panel interviews, right up to the very kind of final stage of the role offer in the role offer even, and the references and all that. And then we also then provide mentoring and training for the graduates throughout their traineeship as well. So every graduate is on typically a 12-month placement with the org that they're in. So For Purpose then would provide one-to-one mentoring to them. And we also do different learning seminars and training sessions throughout the year as well. So it's really, I suppose it's essentially kind of a full kind of graduate program that we're operating on behalf of other orgs.
Just one moment, sorry, there's
no
just
worries.
Okay, sorry.
No,
Adrian, can I ask you to keep talking? I'll be back in 2 seconds.
No problem, no worries. So as I was saying there, it's basically a full graduate program that we operate for not-for-profit organizations, and providing kind of all the different elements from, you know, the recruitment process up to managing the training, the mentoring, and those sides of it as well. I guess it's worth kind of noting as well that For Purpose is part of a company called 2 into 3. So if anyone has seen the ad, you'll note that it kind of says 2 into 3 and For Purpose. So For Purpose is basically, I suppose, the brand of the graduate program, but it's a service provided by 2 into 3, if that makes sense. So it's basically, you know, the organization is 2 into 3 and For Purpose is the brand of the program. But we kind of have it split into kind of two kind of different teams. So 2 into 3 does various kind of things. And then For Purpose is fully kind of managing the graduate program. So this person would be working across both the 2 into 3 recruitment team, but also then with myself on the For Purpose side of things.
Okay. So can I ask you, how is the HR team in For Purpose and 2 into 3? How is that structured? How many of there are you?
Sure. So we're a pretty small organisation. So we have 8 staff in total. And in terms of the kind of the recruitment side of the business, so we have a head of recruitment who's basically responsible for the senior recruitment service that we offer. So on the 2 into 3 side, we do everything from, you know, kind of like everything from management level roles to head of function, even sometimes chief executive level roles. And then there's myself on the graduate side. So my role is managing the grad program. And internally, I also manage HR within 2 into 3. So I look after all that kind of side of things. And then there's 2 other people on the recruitment team as well. One of them is actually moving on to another role. So this is where that kind of position that we have now is after being opened up to kind of backfill that person's role. But in terms of kind of, you know, I suppose the overall kind of HR team, it's really kind of primarily myself. I suppose it's a small business. There's the director of the company then as well. And we'd have management meetings and things like that where we kind of go over the HR kind of side of things as well. But it's primarily myself who looks after that side of stuff.
Brilliant. There, guys, do feel free to pop questions in the chat function, and I will ask Adrian them as well. But I suppose, what do you think the role will involve day to day?
Yeah, so I suppose it's really, I suppose it's quite a busy role actually, in the sense, you know, we do a lot of work with lots of different clients throughout the not-for-profit sector. So day to day, when someone starts out in the role, you know, you'd be starting out with kind of the nuts and bolts, is what I call it, of recruitment. So that's kind of processing applications, screening applications. After a while, after someone has become a bit more comfortable in the role, they might be doing the initial phone screening stage. So with every process, we do kind of a brief phone interview with the candidates to go through some screening criteria. And then as the role develops, so the development is a really key part for us as well, actually, in terms of where, you know, if we take on a graduate, we like to see that person growing into a role and kind of developing in the course of their career. So as they progress, you know, once they've kind of done those initial few months, eventually, if we're working a graduate assignment, they might sit in on interviews with myself. And then usually they might take the lead for a couple of those interviews. So I'm just kind of there as an observer in some of them, taking notes and stuff. And really kind of what we want to kind of see is that someone's able to kind of grow into, I suppose, kind of a full recruiter. So the long-term kind of path or kind of career path that we have kind of mapped out for the person is for them to be kind of able to take on their own projects, whether that's across the senior side or the graduate side. So most people would kind of start out with taking on their own graduate projects, and that'll be kind of as they're kind of coming kind of towards the end of their 12-month traineeship. So that's kind of, I suppose, the longer term path, and the initial kind of stages are, you know, kind of the processing side, screening, responding to candidate queries, you know, kind of drafting documents for clients, job specs, candidate briefs, ad copies, all that kind of stuff.
Okay. And can I ask you, I can only imagine there's huge interest in the role. So what do you think will make a student stand out to you?
So I suppose kind of it's actually kind of quite kind of simple things you can do in the initial stage of the process in terms of making your application stand out. So I suppose having a CV that's well put together and concise is kind of the first kind of key thing that I'd say. Because when we're dealing with volume, when we have a lot of applications, if there's CVs that are kind of, you know, not really formatted correctly, if there's way too much text, you know, if there's like 5 or 6 pages or something really, really long, if the font just looks a bit funny, those kind of things, you know, are where people actually fall down at the first stage. And, you know, they might sound like small things, but it's just when you're dealing with so much, you want to make it for the person who's on the other side, for the recruiter who's looking at it, you want things to be as easy for them to read as possible, and you want to kind of get across, you know, some key points about yourself in terms of what you've studied, a bit of experience that you might have, whether it's, you know, I always tell people, even if it's a part-time job where you've been working, you know, in a shop, or if you've been working in a cafe or whatever it has, you know, there's actually a benefit in including that stuff, because I think people kind of even underestimate that that's an example of, you know, when you have to talk about time management or something like that in an interview, you can draw on those experiences. So including that stuff along with your academic experience, and if you've done any sort of voluntary kind of work as well, you know, for us, because we're working with the not-for-profit sector, we want to see that people have an interest in it, that people have, you know, what's kind of drawing them to it. So oftentimes, whether it's for people who are working with ourselves or for working with our partner organizations on the For Purpose side of things, the people applying would have, you know, voluntary experience often, or they would have done something that's kind of just gotten their interest kind of sparked within the not-for-profit sector, you know, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's always huge things where people have been, you know, giving, you know, 10 hours a week to volunteering or something like that. Like oftentimes it might have been that someone was involved with a fundraiser, for example, for, you know, for a charity, or they've taken part in a once-off kind of event that lasted over the course of a day or two, and that just, you know, that kind of got them thinking about that. So if someone has that to include on their application, that's fantastic as well. And yeah,
Would you say to them now to put that in, because that's one of my questions I was going to ask you is, you know, it says a demonstrated interest in the not-for-profit sector. What does that mean? I think you've kind of answered it, but I think I'd be saying to them, put it in your profile section so you don't miss it. Would I be right there, or would you prefer, you know, where would you like to see that information?
Yeah, so I suppose I think it's no harm to kind of include it kind of further down in the CV as well.
Yeah.
So say, you know, towards the section where some people, if they've done quite a lot actually, so say for example, if they've been on a committee, whether it's in, you know, a college society or whatever, would actually include that under their
Brilliant.
experience section. So, you know, they'll have, say, their profile, their academic qualifications at the front, or at the start of the CV even. Then they might have work experience, and then they might include if they've been on a committee in that as well. And I think that's actually no harm to include that. I know it's technically not work experience, but it's still experience of, you know, being involved with something, and you know, different kind of competencies would come up through that as well. But if someone, say, been involved with a voluntary kind of thing, you could include that. You know, some people actually do it as a section at the end of their CV where they just say voluntary experience. It tends not to be too long. It's usually just a couple of bullet points that kind of summarize, you know, what kind of volunteering activities that they've done. So there's, yeah, so I suppose it's kind of, you can kind of fit it in depending on the level of experience. I think you can kind of fit it in different ways. So if it's a lot, you could nearly include it as kind of you know, a paragraph on its own. And if it's just kind of a few things, I think including volunteering at the end, in particular for us, would be a relevant section to include.
Okay. And do you like a cover letter?
Yes, so for every graduate role that we have, a cover letter is part of the application process.
Okay.
So I suppose kind of my kind of advice or kind of thoughts on those are, again, to kind of try and keep them concise. So, you know, you really want to just illustrate, I suppose, within that cover letter, what's interesting you about working with ourselves. So, you know, what's maybe been the particular draw, looking at kind of, say, the job spec or the ad copy, and we outline kind of the key kind of areas. So taking some of those and kind of linking it in with yourself. So kind of saying, you know, whether it's interpersonal skills, written ability, just kind of highlighting, say, how your skill set matches what we're looking for in terms of the role requirements. And if someone has any experience that they can kind of refer to as well to kind of highlight, you know, I was part of XYZ, which kind of, you know, would make me a good fit for this role. So it's really, you know, kind of keep it kind of concise, and kind of covering those key points between experience and how your skills kind of match the background. And I think with cover letters as well, people can be a little bit put off by them because, you know, they kind of think that they need to write a brand new one for every role that they're applying for. So I think you can kind of, you know, if you get kind of a template where you kind of cover because some bits won't necessarily change in terms of your description of yourself, your initial kind of profile would largely stay the same, but adapting it then for the role, for the organization, and then for the particular skills that that job is looking for as well is good to have. You know, so it's kind of, I wouldn't recommend using kind of a generic one for every role, because you can kind of see that if someone's kind of used.
Oh dear, I don't know if that's me.
If someone's going to use the same one over and over. I think have I dropped out there for a second? Or have you lost yourself, Caroline? Okay, I'm not sure if it's myself or if it's Caroline that's after freezing there, but what I might do is, so I think if everyone is still able to hear me, I'm able to see the chat function there at the side if anyone has any questions, just before Caroline can maybe rejoin us, hopefully. So if anyone has any questions maybe about the role or about ourselves, do feel free to put them into the chat. Otherwise I might just kind of continue talking a bit more about the areas that I was going to kind of cover. But if anyone has any questions, and hopefully Caroline will be able to rejoin us there in the next kind of couple of moments. So I'm just going to look back there actually at some of the other questions Caroline had sent me over. Yeah, so in terms of, I suppose, just to kind of talk a bit about the recruitment process. So basically, the way it works is that the initial kind of stage is putting in your CV and your cover letter. So that's kind of step one of sending in your application, and the contact details for the recruiter on that would be in the ad copy as well for the role. Then it kind of once it comes into ourselves, then we screen through that application. And then candidates who get through to the next stage. Oh, we have you again, Caroline.
Sorry, yeah, I think that guy at the door was the Virgin Media man cutting off the internet.
No, you're fine. It's no problem. No worries at all. I had the list of questions you sent over anyway, so it's just kind of using those. I was just talking a bit about the recruitment process there, but if you wanted to kind of cover something else.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure, perfect. So yeah, so I suppose the after you kind of go through the initial kind of screening stage, once we've received the CV and the cover letter, it goes into a member of our recruitment team who'd have a look through that. They review it to see if it meets kind of the criteria that we're looking for. And then candidates who get through to the next stage would go for a phone interview. So it's a really kind of brief, sort of usually about 10 minutes or so, where there's kind of just some initial kind of basic screening questions where we might ask things like, what attracted you to apply for the role? And things like that would be the kind of areas we'd cover there. Then the next stage of the process would be a one-to-one interview. So that'll be with myself, just with an initial kind of screening interview, where we kind of talk about the role and someone's background in a bit more detail. And then the very final stage is a panel interview, which would involve myself, the director of the company, and then Fergal, our head of recruitment as well. So it's basically we make our selection out of that, and every candidate would prepare kind of a short presentation at that stage as well, on an aspect related to the role. So that's kind of how we kind of go through that kind of process. And but once we get to that final stage, it's kind of a competency-based interview process as well. We go through areas like communication, time management, interpersonal skills, those kind of areas, organization skills, would be all kind of key areas. So having kind of things prepared for those areas in advance is good to have as well.
And what was my last question now would be, I suppose, why do you love For Purpose? What is it that made you want to join?
Yeah, so I suppose I started my career in 2 and 3 4 years ago now. Yeah, just over 4 years, and I actually started as a graduate myself there. So I began on the company's graduate training scheme myself. And thinking back to when I was feels like a long time ago now when I think back to it, but thinking back to then when I started as a grad myself, I suppose what attracted me was that it kind of felt that the work had a bit more meaning to it, in terms of being able to work with not-for-profit organizations. Just felt like I could be kind of putting my skills into something that I kind of could see the direct kind of value of, because the organizations that we work with are providing, in nearly every case, they're providing really essential services. We've worked with organizations who are providing homelessness services, domestic violence services, international development. It's really kind of spanning across the whole kind of gambit of what we'd call the not-for-profit sector. And it's just kind of a nice kind of feeling to know that, on the For Purpose side, that you're putting, placing graduates into those organizations who, would add kind of real value through their roles as well. So, the grads who we have they're really kind of a core part of the teams that they're going into. And it's just kind of a very satisfying feeling to know that you're helping those organizations and the graduates as well, in terms of kind of on the org side, fulfilling their missions and delivering the service that they're providing. And then for the graduates, kind of helping people to find their, a career that they're really, really passionate about and that they really feel strongly about. It's just a really kind of nice feeling. So that's kind of the part of the job that I really like, is kind of when you get that moment where the organization and the person are both, really, really happy to be kind of commencing on this together. And when you see the value of their work as well, because obviously in the For Purpose side, we're in touch kind of throughout the full 12 months of their traineeship. So it's really interesting and really good to see the development of that person over the course of 12 months. You see through the mentoring, how that person is progressing, the different challenges that they have as well, you know, because every graduate has their own challenges. Every role has its own adjustment period and things that people find difficult, but also the ways that people excel in and that people kind of flourish in. So it's really, really nice to see when someone is kind of getting on well, and when they're kind of growing in the role, and then when they make it to the end of the 12 months, when they stay with the organization as well, and you kind of see them progressing. So that part of the job is just probably one of my favorite aspects of it, in terms of when you see it working out for the organization and the graduate like that.
Yeah, brilliant. Rebecca, can I ask you, because now that I'm on my phone, I can't see the chat. Is there any questions in there at the moment?
I'm just having a look there.
Brilliant.
Myself.
Yeah, so there is one question from a student, and they're wondering, is the role for NCI students only?
No, so it's generally, even though I'm actually studying an NCI myself and doing the part-time masters, so I know what boat you're all in as well. I'm trying to do a dissertation at the moment, which is fun, juggling it with work, but it's not just advertised to NCI students, unfortunately. So we've advertised the role on Grad Ireland, so we're getting applications, you know, from all the different kind of third level colleges and universities that have HR courses, and, you know, kind of general business courses as well. So it is being advertised, I suppose, kind of quite broadly.
Perfect. And there's another student as well wondering what the expected start date is for the role.
Yeah, so I suppose, I mean, we're in the first kind of week of July now, and the ad is advertised until the 10th is when we're taking applications until. So in terms of our kind of recruitment process, it takes about kind of 2 weeks to go through the interviews, from the kind of screening up to the panel interview kind of stage. Because we have someone who's moving on from the recruitment team, we're hoping that we can kind of have like a crossover between that person and the person incoming into this role, so that there's kind of a handover as well. So that person, I think, is leaving, I think, mid-August. I can't remember the exact kind of date that they're actually gone. So ideally, if someone was available to start, usually we'd kind of start, if we're recruiting in the summer, someone in September. But just because we're kind of conscious of hopefully having a handover, we're hoping to kind of start someone, say, around kind of the second week of August would be ideal in terms of a time frame.
Brilliant. Is that it there, Rebecca?
Yeah, that's all the questions that are in the chat at the moment. So yeah.
Well, Adrian, I can't thank you enough. That was so interesting, and it's just great, I think, before you apply, to get an insight into what it is you're applying for, what it is you look for, and then the process as well that is ahead of you. So we really appreciate it.
No problem.
Students as well, lovely to see you all here, and hopefully we'll have one of them with you come August.
Absolutely, and no, thanks a million for doing the session, Caroline. Appreciate it. If anyone wants more information as well, so our website, forpurpose.ie, kind of gives some information about the For Purpose program. And then on the 2 into 3 side, it's 2into3.com. So you can just kind of get more of a sense of both kind of sides of what we do. And if anyone wants to, reach out to me after the session as well, do feel free to add me on LinkedIn, or my contact information is on the For Purpose and 2 into 3 websites as well. So if anyone has any follow-on queries about the role, I'd be more than happy to answer those as well.
Thanks a million, Adrian.
No worries. Thanks so much, Caroline.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thanks a million.
Thanks, Rebecca.